All right, let's jump right in. We are heading back in time, way back, more than 5,000 years ago, to ancient Mesopotamia. We're going to one of the world's very first great cities, Uruk. Now, this wasn't just any old city. It was the epicenter of a revolution, a genuine turning point in human history that was about to change absolutely everything.
So that brings up a pretty fascinating question, right? When people finally figure out this incredible new technology for recording their thoughts, what's the very first thing they decide is important enough to write down? You'd think maybe it was a great myth, or a love poem, or maybe the story of some epic battle, wouldn't you?
Well, the answer is way more practical than that. It wasn't literature, it was accounting. Seriously, the earliest writing we've ever found is basically a spreadsheet, a record of goods and transactions. And this, right here, tells you the real story behind why writing was invented in the first place. To really get it, you have to stop thinking of writing as some sudden spark of creative genius. Instead, you have to see it as a solution to a huge growing problem. The city of Uruk was facing a full-blown information crisis. I mean, think about it. If you're living in a small village, you can keep track of everything in your head. You know who owes you what, you know whose goats are whose. Simple. But Uruk was a metropolis. It was a massive hub of temples, workshops, and trade. With thousands and thousands of people and gigantic storehouses of goods, memory just wasn't going to cut it anymore. The whole system was about to collapse if they couldn't find a new way to keep track of it all. So, what they really needed was a new technology. And what they came up with was, for all intents and purposes, the world's very first spreadsheet. And it was all inscribed on a humble piece of clay. And that is the absolute key to this whole story. Writing wasn't born out of a desire for art or poetry. It came from the urgent needs of economics and administration. It was a tool invented for one reason: to manage a complex, growing city. Its purpose was entirely practical: to create a memory that existed outside the human brain. And of course, this didn't just appear out of nowhere. It evolved. For a long, long time, people used these little clay tokens to count things. One token for one sheep. But the real game changer, the revolutionary leap, was when someone decided to stop messing with all these separate tokens and just start pressing signs for those items directly into a clay tablet. That simple idea meant that now information could be stored, organized, and read in a much more detailed and permanent way. And it's from these early picture-like signs, these pictograms, that the more abstract cuneiform script would eventually grow. So, what were they actually writing down with this brand new system? Let's take a closer look at what this ancient data actually tells us. And the scale of this was just staggering. This wasn't just a few simple doodles for sheep and grain. Scholars have actually identified around 2,000 distinct signs from this early proto-cuneiform system. 2,000! That number alone tells you this was already a super sophisticated, specialized code. It had to be to capture their very complex world. And what did those 2,000 signs stand for? Well, the daily grind of city life. These tablets are chock full of records of barley, beer, bread, and livestock. They track deliveries from farms, they list out warehouse inventories, and, super important, they record the rations paid out to workers. They are literally a window into the economic engine of an ancient city. And listen, it wasn't just about drawing pictures of things. A list that just says barley, barley, barley isn't very useful, is it? But a list that says 15 units of barley delivered to the temple, now that's information. And that's why numbers were every bit as important as the pictures. These tablets combine the signs for things with really complex mathematical notations for counting and measuring. That's what made them a true tool for accounting. Okay, so we've got the system, the software, if you will. But what about the physical tech, the hardware? And who were the specialists that actually ran it? What were the tools of their trade? The hardware was beautifully simple: clay. And for that part of the world, it was the perfect medium. It was everywhere, it was cheap, it was easy to work with. But the most important thing, once that clay dried or was baked, it is incredibly durable. I mean, unlike paper or papyrus, which just rots away, clay can survive for thousands of years. It's the only reason we have these amazing records today. And the people who ran this software, they were the scribes. But you've got to stop thinking of them as just writers. A scribe back then was a highly trained information specialist. They were, in effect, the world's first data managers. They were part of this whole new class of experts that was absolutely essential for running the city's complex institutions, from the temple right down to the warehouse. So this brings us to what might be the most incredible part of this whole story. How on earth did this totally mundane system for keeping track of beer and barley lead to, well, everything else?
I mean, that one sentence just captures it perfectly, doesn't it? The skills, the tools, the very idea that you could store thought on a physical object, it had consequences that those first bean-counting scribes could never, ever have imagined.
Just look at how this unfolds. You start with these boring administrative ledgers. But once the society figures out how to record information, that tool can be used for anything. It can be used to write down laws, like the famous Code of Hammurabi. It can be used to record history and diplomacy and science. And eventually, it can be used to write down the great works of literature, like the Epic of Gilgamesh. But none of that, not one bit of it, happens without that first practical step of just counting grain on a piece of clay.
It really leaves you with a final thought, doesn't it? The scribes of Uruk weren't trying to invent civilization. They were just trying to manage the city's inventory. They were solving a practical, everyday problem. And it just makes you wonder, what seemingly mundane problem are we solving right now with our own modern technologies that might just accidentally unlock a future that we can't even begin to imagine?